Welcome to today's Uplift webinar. I'm Serap Zel, founder of Uplift, and we have a special guest, Kim Wylie, with me. Kim has led many transformation projects in some of the most innovative organizations like Google and many others. Business leaders, HR leaders, startup owners, founders, please join our conversation here because today we will be talking about some interesting insights and practical tips about building high-performing teams. Kim, first of all, welcome and great to have you in our webinar.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Great. Kim, you and I know each other, but maybe before kickoff, could you introduce yourself quickly to our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi everyone, I'm Kim. I'm based in chilly London. This morning we were just chatting about the difference in temperature between Dubai and London. And I guess I've had a 20 plus year career now working at the intersection of people and technology. And I've really found a passion for trying to explore and understand how to help people and teams and organizations fulfill their potential. And I've been lucky enough to work for some incredible companies, Google, Farfetch, Builder.ai. And I guess some of the things that I've learned about performance over the course of my career are things that we'll hope we'll dig into today. Yeah. But it's not just about pushing harder, doing more. It's about creating the conditions for people and teams to thrive. So really looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Thanks, Kim. And of course, as you mentioned, like in today's fast-paced environment, I think what I see also from business leaders and HR leaders that they focus on, first of all, hiring the best talent wherever they need to hire. And the second thing is creating this high-performing team with that best talent. From your experience at Google and other companies, can you tell us like what defines a high-performing team with your definition and experience?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question to start because high performance for different types of teams does mean different things. And I think if you're going to explore what are the attributes that make a high performing team, step one, what does performance look like? And the performance of a sales team is going to be different from a performance of a marketing team or a legal team or a finance team. So firstly, thinking about what does performance look like? What are the metrics of output and outcomes that you're looking for from that team? But the piece you mentioned just before about, all businesses hire top talent, of course, that's got to be the starting point, right? But interestingly, the research that happened whilst I was at Google, where we dug into this topic on a multi-year piece of research, we had a similar hypothesis in that the highest performing teams were made up of the highest performing individuals. And what was really interesting through the course of that research is we found that not to be true.
Yeah.
So the core, going through that research, what we uncovered was actually, and of course you've got to have people who kind of get to a baseline of, intellect, skills, capacity, experience. But after that, it's really about how that team operates together, the conditions which the leader helps to create. That is more important than the individuals and them being the most talented people.
Yeah.
Through the course of that research, just to jump in super quickly, was that we uncovered that psychological safety is actually the number one criteria for high performing teams at Google. And this was for all of these different types of teams. So sales teams, legal teams, marketing teams, engineering teams, product teams. When you boil it down, the highest performing teams all shared this attribute of psychological safety. And I think if you're not familiar with psychological safety and what it is and what it isn't, you might think, gosh, is that like everyone's just being very nice to each other? You don't have difficult conversations. It's just kindness. And that's absolutely not true. It's about creating an environment, number one, where people can show up authentically as themselves and contribute to what's going on in that team, but also can challenge each other in a respectful way, challenge the status quo, challenge the leader, bring new ideas, talk about failures in a safe environment. And that's ultimately what leads to the highest levels of performance.
Yeah.
So less about who's in the team, more about how is that team sort of operating. And there's, you know, a bunch of other things that we uncovered during that research as well. But I think
That's
it's
such an
fascinating.
important, point. And as you know, as Uplift, we are on the recruitment and the side
Yeah.
at the beginning of that, bringing that the best talent. But I also feel it's very important to get an idea about the team structure, like who are the other team players, how this person will fit in, and also the leadership style of the leader who is leading that team.
Yeah.
Because I think, as you mentioned, finding that person and bringing that person on board is not enough to to build this high performing team
Yeah.
and creating that environment. And when we say this, of course, people may think that this sounds very theoretical, psychological safety, trust, etc. I'm always interested in also the science part of this
Yeah.
part and this topic. So I know you are also very much on the searching neuroscience and finding the link between neuroscience and building these high performing teams.
Yeah.
So can you explain how understanding our brain can help to build stronger teams?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite topics to get into the learning about. And I think just like at a super high level, one of the challenges we as humans are dealing with day to day in our environment is that society has evolved more quickly than what our brains have. So our brains are still trying to catch up, and they ultimately still sort of operate in the same way that they did when we were hunter-gatherers. Our brains have got one job: keep us alive, scanning the environment for threat and reward. And actually, in our day-to-day environment in the workplace these days, the likelihood of being eaten by a tiger is probably pretty slim. I hope for most of you. But our brains still are really primed to look for any potential threat. And in the workplace, potential threat, sort of bringing it back to this piece around psychological safety. One of the sort of the primary stages of creating a psychologically safe environment for people is that they feel included. There's a really fantastic model on psychological safety, Timothy Clark, you can have a look at it, but essentially there's 4 stages of psychological safety that have to be built upon each other. And that first one is inclusion. And if people do not feel included, fully included as part of the team, authentically as themselves, you can never get to that point where you can challenge each other, when you can speak about failures, when you can bring innovation and great ideas to the table. So that first stage of includer safety is critical for being able to build then to a place where people feel it's safe to learn, safe to contribute, and then safe to challenge.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the really interesting things, I learned this years ago, but it's always really stuck with me, that if as humans we're such social creatures, right? And again, going back to the earlier days of us being a part of tribes, inclusion, if someone feels like they're socially excluded, it actually triggers the same part of the brain that is triggered when we experience physical pain.
Interesting. Yeah.
If you're not feeling included at a very basic level for anything, nothing else good is going to come from your contribution to the team. You'll withdraw, you'll not share your ideas, and then, you know, the team ultimately is not going to benefit from the experience, which presumably you've been hired because of. So just at a very basic level, I think that's one of the really fundamental elements. And if you don't get that right, and making sure that environment when you're bringing new people in is really set up to make those people feel included and that their perspectives are valued, especially when those perspectives are different and maybe the other people in the group. Without that, you're always going to be pushing uphill.
Exactly. And that inclusion piece is definitely very critical. And also, if you don't include the people, right, in the team, then there's that hidden potential staying there, and you can't really utilize
What you're
it.
paying for people for. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
you spend time, effort to bring those people together in that room or the
Yeah.
group that you can't really utilize. And by the way, I would like to welcome again our listeners and audience, and thanks for listening to us. And if you have any questions, comments, please write down below. And we got one comment from Ayman, communication and follow-ups are key to any performing team across any industry. he says. So thanks for your comments. So if you have any questions, let me know, because we have the expert here. So feel free to shoot those questions. And Kim, also another question that I'm really finding interesting, as you also worked with teams, people from different cultures, different backgrounds and geographies, this cultural differences also affect, right? Like how
Yeah.
we build a team.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, how do these cultural differences shape team performance?
Yeah.
And also from leaders' perspective, like what are the factors that the leaders should consider when they have these teams from different cultures?
Yeah, it's definitely, it is a thing, isn't it? Like,
It
when you
is.
travel, when you're on holiday or for work, and and that's the joyous thing about having the opportunity to work with different cultures and different people, is you get to experience different ways of thinking about things, and it's a good way of just challenging your own preconceived ideas about things. Because I
Especially
think,
after COVID, right? So many
yeah,
companies started to work remotely and they started to hire people from different geographies
yeah,
as well.
yeah.
So it becomes much more relevant to the today's world, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all face up in any situation with our own history, our own biases, our preconceived ideas about how people should operate in a specific environment. And that's obviously can be quite damaging if you're working with people from different cultures where maybe they've got, they will have had different experiences, there's different norms, etc. And I think that the most important thing for a leader is to have a curiosity and go in without making assumptions about, that there's some of the things that I've learned over the years. There's maybe certain populations where they will say everything is great if they're asked on a survey, but actually, behind the scenes, the things are maybe not so great. So it's really important, I think, as a leader to try and build that trust from the start, where people feel like they can share and explain things to you. So building that psychological safety is really important. And even creating experiences within your teams, if you're leading a global team, and give people from different countries or regions the opportunity to share a little bit about what are the norms and behaviors and practices that exist within their organization. So it's a learning opportunity for everyone, and then you're not making assumptions that, oh, this person's not speaking up in the meeting, it's because they don't care. Probably, if we start making assumptions like that, we get ourselves into a trap. And again, to your point earlier, you miss out on incredible input from people. So the curiosity, getting to know people on a personal level, and role modeling that inclusion for everyone, and that everyone's ideas are valued as a baseline, you start building that trust and confidence that people feel like they can show up and contribute in the ways that are the most appropriate for them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think here, like one size doesn't fit all, right?
No,
So that's
no.
from leadership perspective.
Yeah.
I also feel, I just remember the example that I got during my career. I was part of the regional leadership team in one of the global companies. And in our leadership team, there were 16 people from 9 different nationalities.
Yeah.
So it was quite diverse, and also it was really nice to hear each other's feedback, etc. But at the same time, we were quite challenged also from the leadership perspective,
Yeah.
because our leader was not patient enough to wait for us to debate ideas, etc. So he wanted to go to the solution and the action quickly. So we had a little bit clashes. I remember some people felt a little bit like, okay, I don't want to contribute much type of feeling. I really felt that inclusion
Yeah.
part and also the leadership style definitely impacting
Yeah.
as well. That was
Yeah.
a really nice learning point for all of us. And also our leader as well, because he learned by feedback and
Yeah.
reactions from the team. It was
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's it's painful to go through those learnings, but ultimately, I'm sure that leader is now a better leader, having had that experience. But I think you just reminded me, one of the things I found to be quite a useful exercise if you are working with a diverse team with people from lots of different countries and nationalities, and it's maybe a group of people who are getting together for the first time. Create a task force that's got a member from each different group, and have have people from within the team come up with some team guidelines and team practices and norms that take into consideration the different perspectives of the people from the different regions. And then that sort of co-creation of, right, this is the rituals we have as a team, this is how we will hold each other to account, this is how we create space for each other, and have that come from the members of the team can be a very powerful way to then feel everyone's got a sense of ownership about how that team works.
Exactly. Yeah. And I actually at this point I would like to ask our audience as well if if there's anyone who worked in this type of culture, cross-cultural environment and the teams, how was your experience? Like, was it that working in that highly diverse team was making the results better, or how was the experience for you? Please share with us. It will be great to hear from you. And also, Kim, I would like to touch a little bit about this data analytics part, because what I usually see on business leaders when we talk about performance, business performance, or the team's performance, usually they look at the business results, right? So bottom line, if it's profitable, is it growing or not? But based on your experience, like what are the other key metrics, indicators that help businesses to assess if their teams are thriving or not?
Yeah. So ultimately, a business is in place to deliver value to customers, shareholders, et cetera, et cetera. So that's always got to be, your primary focus, but it can't be that only, right? Because that potentially could be a very short-term piece if the performance is not sustainable. So I would look at things, these are pretty simple things that anyone could look at, but look at the attrition rates of people within the team. Look at, if you have an employee engagement survey, look at the NPS of the employees and maybe cross-reference that with the performance of the different teams, because you're going to be in a sticky situation as a business if your highest performers in the business are the ones with the lowest EMPS or the lowest sentiment towards the business.
Yeah.
And there's the costs of replacing staff is so much higher than retaining the ones that you have, with making an assumption that you're talking about your high performers here. So like any high performance team, if you've got a high performing sports team, they're not going to be, people are not running the 100 meters every single day and winning every single day, right? You've got to have some downtime as well, and knowing when to sort of, there'll always be moments in a team or an organization's, cadence throughout the year where they're going to have to really lean into more like, right, this is really dialed up on the performance element of this sort of polarity you got to surf as a leader, as a business. And then there's other times where you need to dial it back down again and balance that out with having a bit more space, some time for rest, because no one can operate at their 100% best all the time. We know that from sports, right?
Life happens, right? At the same time.
It's a fallacy. So you have to be able to, yes, there'll be moments when everyone, all hands on deck, everyone is running their 100-meter race, but that cannot be the whole time. You need to then be able to pull it back and dial it up and down as needed. But if you want engaged, happy people who are going to stick around with you to deliver the next big results, again, the next month or the next quarter, there has to be some element of balance.
Yeah, definitely. And I see some questions or comments. Sarah, for example, mentioned that I guess looking at the financials and how well people are being paid, as well as how fair the pay system is quite important. I think that creates also psychological safety, maybe, right, Kim?
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
would.
some
Yeah,
sort
I
of.
think fairness is one of the critical, I guess, domains that every single one of us cares about in the workplace. And there's a really fantastic model which I refer to often from the Neuro Leadership Institute called the SCARF model.
Oh, yes,
Which,
I know. Yeah.
is a fantastic model. And F in the SCARF acronym stands for fairness. But the others, just to run it through, is status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And as humans, particularly in the workplace, we all need all of those things, but some of us need them to a greater or a lesser extent. but feeling like you're being fairly rewarded for your time and your effort is really important for,
Yeah,
for all of us, right? So I
exactly.
think
Yeah,
it's
I
a
think
critical
that's part of
piece.
leadership again, like looking at all
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
balance
The
within the teams,
dimensions.
right?
Yeah.
In terms of skills and also pay and other aspects as
Hmm.
well. Thanks, Sarah, for the comment. And Yusuf also mentioned is a kind of personal situation. I guess I suffer from low education and low skills coworkers. I'm not judging them, but how should I handle such a situation? Also, I feel my work with them is not appreciated. So it's a little bit like pity situation. I mean
Yeah.
we go through all this type of situations. Sometimes we are really in a thriving team. We are part of it, but
Hmm.
sometimes we see some negative examples,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, do you have
Yeah.
any suggestions?
Yeah, just I mean a couple of things that just come to mind, and that I think there's so much freely available education and training, just free
Tools.
stuff online now. I guess I wonder that these team members need to want to learn and develop their skills. So that's the first thing. If they're not in the growth mindset or wanting to develop and improve themselves, it's going to be trickier. But if they are of that mindset and maybe don't know how to go about it, taking offering some coaching, mentoring, support, and maybe just sharing some tips or tricks that of things that have worked for you personally, pointing them to some free resources that maybe they didn't realize
Yeah,
existed, could
yeah,
be a good way of just trying to help everyone, up their game. I think
yeah,
most
exactly.
people most people, I think, want to do well at work. They want to do their best work. They want to learn, they want to contribute. Like, I think it is part of the human condition for most of us to want to do our very best. Um and I wonder that if people have not been in a situation that's been privileged enough to have opportunities to explore and learn, that
Yeah,
would be my first suggestion, is just seeing if there's something you could do to help point them in that right direction.
exactly. And doesn't work. I mean, there should be another option as well. I think preparing for the options ahead of us would be
Mm-hmm.
really nice in advance because it takes time also to get the right opportunity and etc.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
you feel it whether you are in a right environment for you based on your
Yeah.
skills, experience,
Yeah.
etc. or not. I guess
Yeah.
everyone can feel after some months,
Yeah.
right, in that role. I think
Yeah.
that self-awareness is also important and also taking action proactively.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yusuf, thank you for the question.
Definitely. And I think just to add one other little comment to that, it is one of the I would hope, if there's not already a performance management system in place and people have real clarity on what's expected of them and they're given the guidance and support they need to deliver on their expectations. But if people are not delivering what's expected of them, ultimately there should be some kind of either performance improvement plans, and or if those are not worked through,
Yeah,
people should be moved on, because it is one of the things that is the most frustrating for high performers, is if they can see that low performers are not being supported and up leveled, or
yeah,
they're just being left to coast, is very disengaging for your high performers. So of course, no one likes having these difficult conversations, but they are absolutely critical if you want to have a high performing team. Set the bar high, real clarity about what's expected, give all of the guidance and support for people to get there, measure the impact that they're having and so on. But if for whatever reason someone is not the right person to help the team, it's really important to take the difficult action, because otherwise you just demotivate everyone else who's been working really hard.
yeah, exactly, exactly. That's a really good addition. And so far we have talked about psychological safety, trust, a bit cultural awareness, and the leadership as well. But if from our audience, if there are any other criteria that you see is affecting performance of teams, please share with us. But also, I see that all these things just doesn't just happen overnight, right? It
No.
requires leadership, it requires some time and the strong role models. especially during times of transformation and uncertainty. Teams look at their leaders not only for the direction, but also for stability, for the belief, purpose, mission.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, what is the role of leadership in building and maintaining this high performing teams, especially during this change times and transformation times?
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely critical, and there's some interesting research by a company called ProSci, which talks about what are the most critical elements of change or transformation being led successfully, and the number they do this biannual piece of research, and the number one thing that comes up year and year and year and year again is the role of the leader. So the role of the leader in terms of being very active and visible and over communicating what's going on to the team, just bringing what might feel like too much communication and too much clarity. But I've never, at least in my career, come across a team that said, oh, my manager just communicates too much. There's too much clarity. Like, that never happens, right? So I think that clarity and the consistency is really, really critical. And also just role modeling the behaviors that you want the team members to see. If the transformation or the change that is being navigated involves, maybe the transformation is about embracing AI as a team. And the leader potentially is also not an expert in AI, but they should be willing to talk about, just be very vulnerable and say, do you know what? I'm also not an expert in this, but let's work on it together. Let's work together. I'm going to try, I'm going to fail, I'm going to get things right. But if we do this together, and I'm going to share my stories, you share yours, and let's figure it out, is going to be much more compelling and bring people with you than if you pretend you know it all and that you're an expert. And people can see through that. So I think that authenticity and a bit of vulnerability and saying to the team, I don't know this yet either, but we are going to figure it out. Let's do it together and just be authentic but positive, of course, and communicative. But the way you show up as a leader is the number one influencer of a change or transformation being successful, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I think participative leadership, as you mentioned, is very critical. Especially everything is changing so fast and the skills are shifting as well with the AI and the technologies. So that's why we are all learning at the same time, I
Exactly.
guess,
We're all learning
right?
at the same time. Yeah. Which
Which
I
is
think,
nice.
it's a good opportunity for us to do that. And I think once you've been like that with your team, you build that trust, like that authenticity and the vulnerability is a fantastic way of building trust. And then your team members know next time something happens, there's another change or there's something else that's going on, they know they can trust you because you're going to be honest with them about what's happening. So I think
Exactly.
yeah.
Great. Kim, thank you so much. Time is flying so fast. Let me see if there's any comment or question. Sahar mentioned empowering team to set their individual objectives, linking these objectives to their department and organizational strategic objectives. Understanding the big picture and how they contribute to the success of the organization is paramount.
Yeah, absolutely. Purpose is, if we're really tied to the purpose, the work we do every day, we can see how that influences the bigger picture. It's actually one of the Google research which I spoke about right at the start of the conversation. Psychological safety is number one on the list, but the work having meaning for you as an individual and the output of that work, so the impact that work has, is number 5 on the list. So those things are absolutely critical as well. We always do our best work when we feel like we're having a positive impact and it's something that's meaningful.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much, Sahar. And I think what stood out today is the high performance isn't just about pushing harder, right?
Yes.
It's about creating the right environment and bringing the right leadership, of course, to create that environment as well. Not only bringing the right profiles to the team, but also like creating an inclusive environment to utilize all those potential and skills of the team, right?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining, and it was a pleasure to have you in our webinar.
Yeah. No,
Great to have you.
my pleasure, and thanks for the great questions and comments from people as we've talked through. We could talk about this all day.
Yes, yes, indeed. But for our audience as well, anyone listening, whether you are building a global team or growing a startup or driving transformation, I really hope that this little webinar helped you to get some practical takeaways. And thank you for being part of this Uplift webinar, and Kim and the all audience. Looking forward to seeing you again next one.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Sarah.